Hi, my name is Melissa Clark. This is my Module 12 video for EDL850 about tort liability. So what is a tort? So tort law concerns civil wrongs and addresses the duty, the breach of duty, and then the injury sustained to one individual as the result of another individual's conduct. It's based on the legal premises that basically individuals are liable for the consequences of their own conduct, or sometimes lack of conduct, and then when such actions result in an injury to other people. So there's two different categories. You have intentional torts and then you have negligent torts. Intentional torts are assault, whether that's threatening someone, whether that's putting the fear in someone, or doing something that could be battery if it got to that point. Then there's battery, which is physically actually hurting someone, and false imprisonment and defamation. And then negligence includes the duty, breach of duty, proximate cause, and the actual injury. So the first case that I found was Pierce versus the Herney Independent School District. So it has to deal with a situation in which an agricultural teacher had a student working on his farm as part of their schoolwork. This did go by the principal. The principal approved it. However, there was not parental permission given before this happened. Within the incident, two students were on an ATV without any instruction. They did not know, they didn't even have their license. They didn't know exactly how to run an ATV. And when they were on it alone, going somewhere, they lost control. They got off course, hit a tree, and unfortunately, both students were thrown from the device, and one student died of blunt force trauma to the head. The other student did not die, however, they did suffer injuries. Ultimately, the school district was not held liable because they proved that it was not negligence or a breach of duty on the teacher. So, proactive measures that should have been taken. Students should have been instructed on how to drive the vehicle before they were ever given the option to drive the vehicle, and written permission forms for the parents should have been signed before there was any students doing work off the school campus specifically. Reactive procedures that I would take personally in my school, obviously an ambulance right after that happened would be called immediately, parents would be notified immediately, and then this type of work outside of school would be prohibited. That is not something that should have been approved, I don't think, in the first place. So the second case that I found was Barnett versus Caldwell. In this case, a teacher left the room. She asked another teacher to watch the room. However, she basically just told them to listen and make sure everything was okay as she left. She left to take care of what would be considered a personal matter. And then students were horsing around in the room doing horseplay, wrestling. And then one student suffered a lacerated major blood vessel because he dislocated his collarbone, which on the way to the hospital he was pronounced dead. The court did rule that her absence was a discretionary act and she was not found liable for his injuries due to her being away on a personal matter. So proactive, I mean, the hall monitor, another teacher, would be present in the room if a teacher ever had to leave for an absence. First and foremost. And then reactive, if I had to take action after this, obviously after the injury, the child would immediately be transported to the hospital, whether an ambulance was called, and then the parents would be notified immediately for the best interest of that child. The third case, Frame versus Como, I don't know if I said that right. The situation, the student was being disruptive during a test. It was a substitute teacher actually at the time, but it was still a teacher in that building. And multiple students had been sent out of the room, and this particular student was being disruptive during a spelling test. So he had asked him twice verbally already to leave the room, and he did not oblige. So the teacher grabbed his arm to kind of guide him from the classroom. It didn't mention anything that it was forceful, just was kind of a guide out of the room. Well, when he grabbed his arm, he kind of caught the student off guard and it caused him to fall off balance. And when he fell back, he hit the podium and then kind of fell back on and hit the blackboard or the whiteboard inside the classroom. So the teacher was not charged in the case because they deemed his actions were justified, that it was within his means to get the child out of the classroom, and that there was no malice or poor judgment or bad intentions when he put his arm on the student to remove him from the room. So proactive before you ever place your hands on a student, which should not be done in the first place, but another teacher or another adult should be in the room before any type of physical discipline is used with students of any age. And then the office would be called before to notify of an unruly student, and then someone from administration or maybe another teacher can come in and help out and get him removed from the room without any physical touch being involved. Reactive, if the situation were to already have happened, obviously the student would be taken to the nurse and checked out for an injury, and if there are injuries, follow protocol after that, whether they need to be taken to the hospital, anything after that. Parents would obviously be notified instantly. A written statement would be taken from the student involved, the teacher involved, and any student witnesses following the incident. So words cannot get twisted or tangled, and I think that should happen immediately after also. So my fourth case is Flanagan versus Canton. In this case, a PE teacher was dealing with a rowdy and disruptive class. She had to end the class a little early. The students took a few minutes before they usually go into the locker room. She kind of had to redirect them, tell them the importance of listening to directions and all that. And then while she handled an incident with an individual student right outside the locker room, she went ahead and allowed the other kids to go in and begin changing so they wouldn't be late for their class. So they were unsupervised in a locker room. So two students were goofing around. One pushed the other, and they fell over a bench and then severely injured himself. And the court ended up siding with the student because the teacher was considered what was a breach of duty because she was not supervising the students, and they considered the conduct foreseeable due to them horsing around and being disruptive during class anyway. So proactive measures I would have taken, the matter with the individual student would be addressed inside the locker room. So she could have had that conversation inside the locker room, just away from other students, so she could still have an eye on what's going on. And then students would be reminded of the locker room expectations before, since she was aware of their rowdy behavior. So just even a quick 30-second reminder, what should you be doing? This is how long you have. You need to get it done, kind of thing. Just kind of a quick reminder of expectations for them, I think, could go a long way. Reactive measures, students would immediately be checked out by school nurse, and if it was deemed necessary that he go to the hospital, he would be transported to the hospital. So my last case was Munn versus Hotchkiss. This I thought was a very interesting case. In this situation, the school went on a field trip in which they were camping, and there were hikes and all sorts of things like that involved. A student was bitten by a tick during this field trip on a hike. The tick was carrying a specific disease in which the student did contract, and it ended up causing severe neurological damage in which she couldn't speak any longer. The student's parents ended up suing, saying that they were not informed that there were going to be any harmful insects in this case on the field trip, and they ended up winning the case, and they were awarded a total of over $41 million in damages by the school. So proactive, obviously the parents would have been informed of all possible dangers that would have been involved. They would have told the students. I mean, things like this you can't exactly prevent. However, just saying, hey, this is possible that this could happen while we're on a hike out in the woods. So I think just on the parental form, saying that this is something that could possibly happen, this is a risk, this is a danger, having that on there could really end up saving you in the end. And students would be advised to put on tick and insect repellent before the hike, even if parents didn't put it on before. That's just something provided. That's something that I think you should give every student an opportunity to put on. Reactive, after the situation has happened, parents would be notified as soon as the tick was found on the child. So that way, if they needed to go get any kind of testing directly after, they could do that without having to wait until they realized that something was wrong. And then permission forms in the future would obviously include all of those possible risks that could take place. So in terms of professional ethics, I think just your good judgment, your discretion when you're teaching. Obviously, things like making your presence known to students and staff. I think that's a really big one, but something that we don't think about as much. But just your presence being there can help with things like rowdy behavior or rowdy behavior, pushing students, shoving students, that kind of thing. Just you being there makes them not want to do that as much. Supervising students at all times, whether it's you needing to take a personal matter and having another teacher watch your class or another administrator or a hall monitor, just taking that into account when you are having to step outside of your room. Never leave your room unattended. Do not touch students. You should never touch students, even if it is a disciplinary measure. And then give students reminders of the expectation throughout the year. Even on very simple things, they should be reminded all year long. Communicating effectively with all faculty members, administration, janitors, other teachers, secretaries, paras. I think having everyone on the same page is very important. It keeps communication open. Everyone knows what's expected of them, and overall, it's just very important for the school community as well. And then last but not least, probably the most important is obviously student safety being your first priority at all times. You should always be aware what students are doing, what they're getting into, possible things that could happen. You should always have that in the back of your mind. And no matter what you're doing, make sure the safety of the student comes first.